things and making recommendations. I mean, Buckaloo didn't know what he was talking about.
Hello, my fellow Alaskans. Sorry about the delay there. Looks like I've now got it back to being a solid stream. I've done a whole bunch of changes in the network. Completely rebooted. This is take 2. Don't forget to like and share. I've rewound it for about 5 minutes. We should be good to go here in just a second. And I'll just shut up on my end.
For Mr. Barr on the extent of the powers involved in his proposed amendment. Was he content with expanding the protected investigative and reporting powers just to, quote, public offices and institutions, unquote? Or did he want to extend that protection even further to investigate anything involving the public welfare? Delegate, so going down to the middle of the page, Delegate Barr replies. He goes, no, I think that their powers should be a little broader than that. I don't know what the powers are right now exactly, but I do know that they make recommendations concerning other things than public offices and officers. And under this provision, it would only investigate and make recommendations concerning things that endangered public welfare safety. And I believe that is what the grand jury is for, to protect the rights of its citizens. They do not necessarily have to defame any person or mention him by name. If the tax collector was using methods not acceptable to the public, they might make a recommendation for a change in the tax collection, etc. And I think it would be their duty to do so. So Barr is saying the grand jury, again, and this is consistent with what we've seen in the previous debate, that the grand jury is there to protect citizens from the government. And here Barr is saying that when it comes to investigations, it not only protects the citizen from the government, it's anything that is for the public welfare. And so when Barr finishes saying this, Delegate John Hellenthal speaks next. And again, Hellenthal comes from a legal family. His dad was a judge. His uncle was a judge, or excuse me, was a lawyer in Juneau. And Hellenthal was also a lawyer. And he speaks up, and I'll do his quote here at the top of page 62. Turn to page 62. Hold on a second. He goes, Mr. President, my suggestion was that the word detrimental be stricken and the word involving be inserted. So right there, where Barr was talking about the grand jury could investigate things that were detrimental to the public welfare, Hellenthal is saying involving. So it doesn't have to be detrimental to the public welfare, just anything involving the public welfare. And continuing, he goes, because I agree with Mr. Barr that the investigative power of a grand jury is extremely broad, not as narrow as Mr. Rivers contends. I think a grand jury can investigate anything. And it is true that there is little protection against what they call in the vernacular a runaway grand jury. But in the history of the United States, there have been few runaway grand juries, extremely few. And I think that the broad statement of power that Mr. Barr asked for is proper and healthy. Now, this is an extremely important statement for our purposes. And as you'll see, Mr. Hellenthal was really the last person to speak on this issue. And he's a lawyer. He understands the powers of the grand jury. And he's saying the power is extremely broad. And a grand jury can investigate anything. And he even gets to Buckaloo had talked about reports that might cast somebody in a bad light. And Hellenthal, when he talks about runaway grand juries, that's what he's talking about. And he's saying there's extremely few instances in the history of the United States where grand juries have made recommendations against people that aren't called for. And so even in the choice of words, but in the history of the United States, that tells me that Hellenthal knew all of this history about the grand jury that we've been talking about for the last couple months. He knew this history of the grand jury. He knew all the instances that they had been able to investigate. He knew about how the grand jury in New York and San Francisco and Minneapolis had protected citizens from wide-scale corruption. He knew the importance of this. So his those words are extremely important because after he spoke, Delegate George Sundberg from Juneau, I think he was a newspaper man, he moved to amend Mr. Barr's amendment by striking the words detrimental to and putting involving in its place. So Mr. Barr was agreeable to that revision. And so the amendment went to vote. And so the delegates voted 44-8 in favor of expanding the protected powers of the grand jury. In other words, the grand jury can investigate anything. That vote is overwhelming. It's even wider than I think it was 39-12 or 13 for use in criminal matters. That is just overwhelming evidence that our founders felt that citizens comprising the grand jury ought to be able to investigate anything. And so all these things we've been asking for, where we've been running into roadblocks by government officials, their actions are illegal. So going on to the next page, we're about wrapping up here. We have in the middle of the page, we have the text from the final version of Article 1, Section 8. And we've covered this before, but I'll read the last two sentences again, or the last sentence. The power of grand juries to investigate and make recommendations concerning the public welfare or safety shall never be suspended. So that's what we have today. That sentence has not been amended. It can only be amended by a constitutional amendment. So that's what's in there today. So in my going down a couple paragraphs, I write, none of these inherent rights can be unilaterally taken away from us by the Alaska legislature, the Alaska governor, or the Alaska Supreme Court. And that's, unfortunately though, as we're going to find out in the coming chapters, that hasn't been the case. We're going to find out, that's what next chapter will be about. It'll be about the 1985 investigation by a Juneau grand jury into Bill Sheffield, the governor. And it was after that they recommended the governor be impeached. This is when we start to see the legislature, the governor, and the Supreme Court gang up on the Alaska grand jury. And so we'll be going over that in detail starting next week. And in the Juneau grand jury, it's going to be a long chapter, but it's one of my favorite chapters because it's an instructional guide to all of us on how a grand jury should do it. how does a grand jury go about investigating these things? You know, how should a grand jury act when it's investigating, you know, the David Haeg situation? So that'll be a good guide for us. The last thing I had underlined here, and this is something that last thing I have highlighted, is this quote that David Haeg had outlined or highlighted at the very bottom of the page. And it's the definition. This is a definition of what public welfare or safety means. Again, public welfare or safety is what grand juries can investigate in Alaska. And there was actually a 1987 report from the Alaska Judicial Council, and this is what they had to say about the phrase public welfare or safety. They go, it has been interpreted very broadly and includes concerns with public order, health, or morals. Black's Law Dictionary defines general welfare as, quote, the government's concern for the health, peace, morals, and safety of its citizens. Suspend is defined in case law and by Black's as to cause to cease for a time, to postpone, to stay, delay, or hinder. In other words, the Alaska Constitution gives grand juries the power to investigate into and make recommendations addressing virtually anything of public concern. The broad general power can never be hindered or delayed. Now, consider who this is coming from. Who is saying this? This is the Alaska Judicial Council saying this in 1987 in a written report. And they're concluding this by saying, the Alaska Constitution gives grand juries the power to investigate into and make recommendations addressing virtually anything of public concern. And this broad power can never be hindered or delayed. And delay means to, you know, postpone, to stay, delay, or hinder. How is Supreme Court Order 1993 not a violation of this language right here? It is. It's a hinder, it's a delay, it's a postpone, it's a stay. So by their own language, the judicial system 35 years ago said that what they're doing today they can't do. You know, another thing is, you know, this definition of public welfare safety concerns health, peace, morals, and safety of its citizens. So by definition, a grand jury could investigate morals. So there's next week, I'm going to, that'll wrap it up for what I have to say about my book today. I see I've got about 10 minutes or so before we take questions. I wanted to bring everybody listening to their attention a case that I've been investigating here for the last few days. It's extremely disturbing. I think that this case was one of the reasons why Supreme Court Order 1993 was passed. But it involves this case was brought to my attention by one of you out there listening and watching. And it concerns an Alaska mom. And it concerns OCS. 22 months ago, OCS came in and took all 5 of her children away from her. And they did it with false allegations of medical abuse. And digging into this case, I am as disturbed as I was with the Thomas Jack case, where state officials know the truth, but they do these things for other reasons, for other purposes. Now, all 5 of these children, most of them are special needs. These were kids who, while they were in their mother's womb, there was intake of drugs and alcohol. These kids are dealing with fetal alcohol syndrome. A couple of them are dealing with autism. And this Alaska mother, she adopted the first 3 of these 5 kids at birth. She took them home from the hospital. She gave them a home, a caring home. Later, it came to be that one of the children had a sibling who was born. And the parents wanted the siblings to be together. And so this woman acquired a 4th child, special needs. And the 5th was the same way. Another one of her kids had another sibling that was born. And the parents wanted this mom, they wanted their kids to be raised together. They wanted this kid to adopt her. So she did. 5 kids. And when they took these kids away, they were aged 10 to 16. And I won't get into further specifics, but what the state has done is horrific. And the Dunleavy administration at high levels knows about this, and they've done nothing. And from what I can see, this is all about, it's about revenge by the state. It's about power. It's about money. And, I think you'll start seeing I'll be writing about this story here, hopefully publishing a story soon. But you're going to see parallels with David Haeg's case. You're going to see parallels with Thomas Jack case, those of you who may be familiar. So there's this very disturbing pattern that we have in Alaska right now, where we have 5 Supreme Court judges that are passing illegal rules to deter grand juries. But we also have an attorney general and a line of succession of attorney generals who have been trying to suppress grand jury investigations as well. And we see that in Supreme Court Rule 1993, where it was a collaboration between the Attorney General and the Supreme Court. So something else I want to bring up about this family. In the last year and a half, these kids have been split up. They've been put in separate homes. And they've been moved 50 times. So I know that there's a number of people listening who believe in prayer, who believe in God. And this is one of the reasons why this case came to me. This mom has been sending out prayer requests. She had her kids in a Christian school when they were taken. She's always had her kids in Christian schools, participating in church. And all of this has been removed. And we're dealing with some very evil forces here. And so I would just request that for those of you who believe in prayer as I do, that you pray for this woman, you pray for these 5 children, for their safety, for their reunification, and that justice will be done. But just not your prayers. Start talking to other people. I think some of you know about this case. And to the extent that you haven't, I think we all need to let others know about what's going on. And to the extent anybody listening has access to our leaders to demand answers. Why? Why are they allowing this to go on? And accountability. So I'll wrap it up there and open it up for questions. I mean, just in the last week, you know, there's been more developments. We have systemic corruption in Alaska. Systemic. There's an issue with surety bonds. You know, and this is part of the problem. If there was a surety bond which protected citizens against misconduct and errors of government officials, maybe they wouldn't make so many errors. But there's not. There's no surety bonds that protect citizens against these things. Another issue that came to my attention in the last week are things going on at Anchorage International Airport. It looks like it's unsafe to fly in and out of there. There's people who've been promoted who aren't on the merit system, and people who aren't properly equipped to manage people who are out on the runways and clearing, snow removal, these kind of things. These issues have been brought to the governor's attention, to the Department of Law, to the Ombudsman, and nothing has happened. So it's systemic in Alaska. And I'll turn it over for questions.
Well, thanks so much, David, for for everything. You know, not only the sort of education on your book itself, but also the sobering examples of reasons that this is so important. So I'm sort of pausing and giving an opportunity for those that have me and want to volley questions my way to do that. So I'll kind of pause here for a moment and see if anything comes in. And if anybody in the room or online has questions, I see there's a couple other attendees online as well. For the room, it sounds like there may not be any questions at the moment. So any of the other Zoom attendees have questions that they might want to ask? Well, maybe we're getting out of
yeah, hey, it's always good to get out of class early, right?
David, do you want us to unmute you? Let's see. Let me ask to unmute and see if there's something there. There you go, David, you're live.
Say, David, where can we get information regarding that family that you're referencing?
Well, you know, we're dealing with a sensitive issue. There have been a number of prayer requests that have gone out by the mother to other individuals. I think maybe when, you know, we're offline, people can start talking about that and you know, figuring out what all can be said. I can say this, that this woman's case and her family's case is part of the federal class action lawsuit that was filed in Anchorage District Court this summer. It's a 95-page report. It's a class action suit against OCS, against the commissioner, Adam Crum. And there's two East Coast law firms that are involved, and a couple Alaska law firms that are involved. But the facts, some of the facts of her case appear in that complaint, along with 5 or 6 other stories. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm hearing a lot. I've got limited time into what I can look into and write about. I will be, I hope next week to finish an article that I'm writing about this case. That hopefully will be, it'll be published through one form or another, and you'll be able to read more.
Does it have to do with the December? Does it have to do with the December 15th court case that was to be heard in Anchorage that was canceled?
I think, yeah. I mean, Thomas Garber was bringing that request for investigation. I wrote I don't know if I told you all last week, but I wrote about a 5-page letter to Judge William Morse 2 weeks ago, asking him to explain his actions in turning that down, because what I found out was that the grand jury investigation that Representative Tammy Wilson requested back in 2016, which she said got hijacked by the Attorney General and got turned over to the Ombudsman, that case is still open. So one of my questions to William Morris was, and he's the presiding judge, he's in charge of grand jury investigations or grand juries in Anchorage, District 3. I mean, I think, that includes you guys. And I said, well, why did you dismiss Thomas Garber's case? Because, Morris vacated the hearing because he said Supreme Court Order 1993 prevented, that grand jury investigation from going forward. So I told Morris, well, look, if the 2016 case is still open, you could have just referred Garber's concerns over to that existing grand jury. And so he hasn't responded to that. I sent another letter off to someone in the a deputy attorney general. Her name is Jenna Greenstein. She filed a notice of appearance in that 2016 grand jury case last year. So I sent her a letter, and I'm going, well, why did you file a notice of appearance in that case? What's going on? And she actually responded, and because I also asked her if she was the attorney who led the Juneau grand jury investigation that I had requested, because they were advised by someone within the Office of Special Prosecutions, and Jenna Greenstein is within the Office of Special Prosecutions. And I was asking, who's the identity of this lawyer who has the egregious conflict of interest, who would lead a grand jury that's investigating the same department that is that is advising them? I mean, that's just egregious conflict of interest. And her response to me was no comment on that part. With respect to the Anchorage, with the Tammy Wilson investigation, she said, well, I was doing that to get some information out of the court file. Really? So a prosecutor can just go to a secret court file and request information without a hearing? What if the grand jury is investigating the Office of Special Prosecutions? I mean, the whole thing is messed up. And the more these people try to cover what they do, they're just digging themselves a bigger hole. It just makes no sense. So to answer your original question, and when Thomas Garber appeared before, he was last in court, there was a hearing October 13th or October 14th. And that courtroom was filled with supporters. I've heard maybe 20 to 30 people were in there, and some of those people in there wanted to join Thomas's investigation, and the judge told them that they had to file separately. And believe me, this case would have come up. This case and the other ones in that federal lawsuit would have come up. So, I think that was exactly why they rushed through Supreme Court Order 1993, and why they did it over the objection of some of the people on the Rules Committee, who said, wait, there's some constitutional issues here. We shouldn't be rushing this through. The Supreme Court ignored them. One of them was a judge, Thomas Temple from Fairbanks. Okay, more questions in the back.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, when I asked about whether that family of five was involved in the December 15th, and you mentioned Thomas Garber's name, so I'll just go ahead and use it. So was that family of five, is that part of the Thomas Garber case, or did I understand what you were telling me there was that he or she would have been part of that Thomas Garber case had it moved forward? Is that what I'm understanding?
I would, the latter, definitely. Okay. Thomas was requesting a wholesale investigation into the OCS. He saw the problems there, and he had gone before, he had joined in with David Haeg and Ray Southwell back in 2018, when they tried to get a grand jury investigation from William Morse. And so Morse turned him down back in 2018. And so again, in 2022, Garber, he attended several hearings. I think they were therapeutic court sessions in which Morse was presiding over, and Thomas would go up to him and talk about OCS and the need to investigate it. And, there were several cases that are of concern to Thomas. Like when I wrote that article in Must Read Alaska, where I talked about the 4 or 5 investigations that had been hijacked by the Attorney General in the courts. There was another investigation. It was by the Department of Administration, this John Lee. And I wrote how, and there's not a whole lot I can say about that publicly, but, he was T-boned when he was driving home one night and ended up in a coma for a month. Garber, and Garber is not working alone on this stuff. There is a sizable group of people who are very upset about what OCS is doing and have been working somewhat behind the scenes. And so absolutely, positively, this family and their, family of 5 and their mother, family of 6, would have been part of that investigation that Thomas Garber was requesting.
Well, thank you so much, David, for your time and for feedback. Any final questions in our last couple minutes of our Zoom session? Hearing none, David, I thank you for your time this evening, and for everybody that's committing their evenings to either watching online or being with us here in Zoom. This has been a supremely useful collection of information, and I, for one, hope that we all are putting our best foot forward to move forward on this information so that we can have an effect. So thank you again, David, and to everybody online. And I'll go ahead and finish off the live stream, and the Zoom will stay up for a moment while that's happening.
Okay. All right. Thanks you all for attending and your passion for justice.
Well, thank you guys all for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it. And I'm glad you guys all could partake. Hopefully you have watched the second half of this. I had to completely stop the entire broadcast from what I first originally had going. Rebooted my entire network. Something was glitching out and I couldn't get anything to stabilize. Once I got the network completely rebooted, the second half here was flawless. It was perfect. I couldn't ask for anything better than what I was able to get here today. For our first attempt to try to rebroadcast a resume of a Zoom, I think we did pretty good. Next time I'm going to see about actually being a part of their Zoom session so that it's streaming their Zoom onto my screen, and then I will capture that Zoom and rebroadcast it onto Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and you'll find this also on Rumble here a little bit later. And once our website's up and running, you can always catch our live broadcasts on Politadick.com. Also goes there and click the support button. We are so close to having our website back up, and I just can't wait. I keep hearing all of these. It's going to happen, and I've been waiting for a month, and I keep telling you guys it's going to happen, but I finally did all the final steps here about 3 days ago to completely remove everything from who was hosting it to someone else, and I'll announce who they are later on as long as things get up and running. And if things don't get up and running, I may say something else about what happened there. But suffice to say, one of the oldest networking companies in the nation. I have been with them for almost 30 years, the last 2 years in a row. When it came time for renewal and re-upping for the website, they shut it down the last time for about 30 days. This time my site's been down for a month, almost a month and a half, and since the 9th of December, so that's how long it's been down. And this is all because of the networks that are out there that don't want, I believe personally, I think it's just they don't want my type of a website up and on the internet. They're doing everything in their power to keep it stifled, to prevent it from being seen out there, prevent it from propagating. They don't like the material that I'm posting on our website. I don't know why that is. I mean, this never gets flagged for fake news, but when you're on one side of the fence, they just don't like to hear from you. So if you haven't done it yet, please like, share, and again, I will be doing this every Thursday night. I'm going to restream the Alaskans for Constitutional Rights is the ones that presents this, and that is AFCR 1776. If you're looking for their website at .com, if you're on Facebook, just type in AFCR 1776 and you will pull up their page immediately, or Alaskans for Constitutional Rights. They do have a private membership group and they have a public one, which is the public one is where I am on right now, that I streamed all of this out to you. I've been working for several weeks now trying to get it coordinated and set up so that I can had permission to be able to do these restreams so that we can reach an even larger audience. And I was superbly happy to see we had about 25 people through all the different channels watching this tonight. So that's not bad for first broadcast of a rebroadcast of what they have going on. The more Alaskans that we get informed about what's going on with the Alaska Grand Jury investigation and into the corruption of our judicial branch, the easier it is going to be to correct the problem that is out there. But if it's kept in the dark, then no one's going to know about it, and our judicial branch is going to continue to get away with the corruption that they have been perpetuating within our state for decades now. This isn't just a new recent problem. This has been going on since Sheffield, Governor Bill Sheffield. So if you don't know the reference that I'm giving there, just Google who Governor Bill Sheffield was, and this is when we started watching all the problems with our judicial branch completely go downhill, and following the Constitution for their own written rules and laws that they create themselves, not our legislators, have been protecting them, and it's time to bring accountability back. And that's what this organization is all about. I may be paraphrasing a little bit, more ad-libbing into what they're actually doing there, but I think I pretty much nailed the summation there on the head. Thank you again for being here tonight. I hope you guys all have a great Thursday evening. I will be on again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I will be broadcasting the Alaska Senate Finance Committee, and they are getting to hear all of the revenue, the projected revenue that they have sitting there right now. So they've had 6 months at what I would classify record-breaking oil prices, well above like $25 a barrel above what they need to actually cover the state budget with extra padding. So they have, if by my guesstimate, without actually seeing the numbers tomorrow morning, about $3 billion above and beyond what the governor's proposed budget was sitting on hand right now, just from this year's revenue that came in through the door. They're trying to spin it as something different. If you would have saw the Resource Committee's meeting yesterday morning, the 9 a.m. one, not the smoke and mirrors one, let's introduce ourselves at 4 o'clock, but the one that happened at 9 o'clock in the morning, they were talking about all the future projections of forecasts of production for the North Slope and for the Cook Inlet region and all the different resources out there that fall along the lines of that right there. And they were, in my opinion, painting it, if you listen to the Senate Finance Committee members like Bert Stedman and whatnot, when they would ask questions, they were pushing a narrative. And that's the word I want everybody here that is watching now, every Alaskan in the future, to keep in their heads when they hear our politicians in Juneau, our legislators in Juneau, talking about what they're doing. If they are part of the majority, listen to the narrative. That is the entire thing that's going on this year, the narrative they spin about everything. So the narrative they spun about the resources and the production and the forecast there is grim. Negative 2% production down from the year before. We're doing worse than we were. Things are not looking up. We must be looking in dire straits because the Willow project's on federal land, and we Alaskans don't see a share of that in our Permanent Fund Corporation because it's on federal land. And the legislators, Stedman and his crew there in the Finance Committee, are so sad that the government federal government gets 50% and they only get 50% instead of the 90-10 split that we get when it's on state land. Well, our state land, our legacy oil production and stuff like that has been declining. Places like Hillcorp has been able to bring that production level back up again, but nowhere near the record levels that it was producing a long time ago. And as long as the Biden administration or Obama administration or the green activist lawsuits that continue to happen from everywhere else but Alaska trying to shut down any of our resource development continues, we're going to watch the decline in revenue coming from the resources that we have here in Alaska over the next 10 years is going to dramatically drop to absolutely almost nothing. And that's the prediction that they were giving out there. They say that within the next 10 years, without any new oil production beyond what they have here right now, our state will no longer be able to cover its budget, even after using the entire PFD, which is, of course, always on the agenda of what they plan on using to steal from all of us. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., tune in with me. The first 2 weeks are always the most important to watch. That's why I try to dedicate as much time as I can to restreaming everything that is going on down there in Juneau in the first couple of weeks, because that lays the foundation for the BS, the games that they play for the next 2 months until it becomes the very last week of the session. And then that's when they'll finally bring out the budget of all the stuff that they've been discussing here in the first 2 weeks that I'm trying to cover right now. So stay tuned. Hope to see you guys all tomorrow morning. And one last one, Saturday we got the Concerned Conservatives of Alaska at 11 a.m. at Real Life Church. And I will also be there to live stream that. If you cannot participate, that is located in Palmer, Alaska. And just Google Real Life Church and you'll be able to get a roadmap right to their front doorstep. And that begins at 11 a.m. It is a must attend. It is much more informative when you are there in person. Also gives you the opportunity to directly ask questions of whoever may be speaking for the day. So we really do appreciate you guys all participating, and stay tuned. We got lots more coming. I plan on streaming a lot more. I promised you guys all that, and I am working on getting more stuff posted on a daily basis when it comes to the stuff that other people are producing, exposing what is out there in the government, and I will start giving you guys my 2 cents, just like I used to do all the time. Drove you nuts. I'm planning on becoming that nut creator once again. I love nuts. It's like squirrel. All right. Okay. Enough is enough. Good night, you all. We'll see you later.